Alrighty.
Who we got here?
How you doing, bro?
Man, I thought I would never see you again, my brother.
I've been hiding in the UK and keeping myself really fucking busy. So it's been full on. I've been here. Well, I think I got here just after you left to go back to SA because I went to stay with who was it? One of the VOD guys, maybe Francois. I can't remember.
So you've been in the UK since 1995?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Shit,
been a long
mate.
time.
You're looking good, bro. How long?
Thanks,
Fuck,
man.
that's a. Jesus, I thought old Adam had a big fucking beard, but now that takes the fucking cake, bro.
It's been growing for a while, man. I went last year. I was on a couple of really big fucking projects elsewhere in the world, pretty much back to back. So I decided it was the perfect opportunity to go fucking completely native and just grow a massive beard before anybody in my office could tell me not to.
Paul,
Yeah.
are you here, mate?
How's it? Can you see me?
No, you
No,
can't.
we can see a picture of you. We can see a picture. We don't see your video, mate. So, James,
Yo.
just while we wait for him to join, I from the little fucking contact I've had with you in the last 2 month maybe. I mean, I actually didn't think I'll be able to get hold of you, but it sounds like you're doing some sort of concert stuff.
Yeah, I sort of, I ended up working for Mean Fiddler here in London, booking bands for them and running loads of their venues for, maybe 12 years. And then I went freelance for 5 years, booking bands as an independent promoter and whatnot, and sort of doing production management for a lot of bands.
Yeah.
And then then we sort of arrived at COVID, and obviously the whole live music industry fucking fell over. But maybe 10 years before, because I was doing a lot of really big shows. So I actually went and studied a health and safety degree because there was no health and safety in rock and roll.
Yeah.
And and then when COVID hit, I just sort of, maybe for 4 or 5 years before COVID, I started really diversifying. Started doing bits of theatre, bits of corporate events, bits of film and television, because I got a bit bored of just doing rock and roll all the time. I was fucking, mentally, I was fucking drained of it. And then COVID hit, and I just ended up in film and TV world. And so I currently do, 2 or 3 festivals a year that I look after directly. Obviously offer bits of advice to up and coming bands, trying to get them on the circuit. But most of my work now is in film and television. So, it's just, I'm at that age, you know what I mean? I can't be fucking touring anymore,
Yeah.
Fuck
But
that.
the Mean Fiddler, I remember the name. Fuck it. But
They own they own the Forum, the Astoria, the Garage.
Yes.
So I ended up managing all those
the big fucking clubs. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the big venues.
Yeah, I ended up managing and booking bands into them over 12 years. So I was I was right at the cutting edge of it for a long time. I'd done the Borderline. I actually found your flyer from VOD playing the Borderline, believe it or not, in the archives when I went through, went through it all. It's still on my other laptop somewhere. I've got photos of everything.
Yeah, that was an incredible gig. The first time I went to the Borderline, Joanna and I spoke about this the other day. I went to see, I nearly said fucking Carcass, but it was old Lee Dorian's band, man. What was it? Cathedral.
Cathedral. Yeah. I mean, it's I've ended up being actually really good mates with Lee Dorian over the years because with his Rise Above, his label, he kept on coming to me going, "Hey James, can we get this band on this gig? Or, can you do an album launch?" So I actually ended up helping him organize Cathedral's final show, when they split up. He came to me and he said, "Hey James, I want you to help us put on our final show, and we're going to have a couple of really cool supports." And so I actually still know him. I still hang out with him today. I was with him a couple of weeks ago. but yeah, it's sort of it's yeah, like anything in life, dude. It's a journey. You know what I mean? It's sort of nothing comes to you easy, right?
No, you've done well, mate. I'm quite impressed. Fucking, most of us went to the UK and sort of just did foxy jobs, like fucking polishing shoes or fucking working for IT companies.
I sort of done the same for a while, and then like weirdly, one of the people that I met over here, like sort of, she ended up being quite a big wig. Well, she was like Earache's label manager for fucking years and years and years, and then she broke away and started her own label. And I sort of met her at the point where she had started her own label and she'd like signed like Cradle of Filth and fucking, the really early sort of, so she sort of tends, I was hanging out with her in the pub and she was like, fucking hell, man, there's a really good job come up at Mean Fiddler. I'm going to put your name forward. And I was like, yeah, whatever, man, stick me in contacts. And so I ended up, that's how I ended up getting an in with them. So it was, it was like sort of, fortuitous, shall we say.
Yeah. That's fucking incredible, mate. So
there he is.
There he is.
There he is. I can see that face again.
Hey, how's it, man? Fuck.
Finally.
Jesus. This is for the young folk, eh? Fuck me.
Yeah. It's like Commandant. Look, he's wearing his camos. He's on the farm, bro. He's going shooting.
That's my plan. But fuck. Jesus, good to see you, Oaks, man.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome to see you, bro. Yeah, this is like Paul's been quite like handy with information and shit, and he gave me your details and stuff. But I mean, I had no fucking clue that we're going to get hold of you, mate. I thought like, most of the guys when they go to UK, like Paul Freebody and all these guys, they just disappear into like oblivion, and you never get hold of them again.
It's like the only time you hear of anybody is when Facebook tells you it's their birthday.
Yeah.
And then like fucking 5 million birthday wishes from people you've seen 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. I mean, I still like, try my best to keep up with, what's going on in SA through like social media, and sort of, and obviously, it's hard to do, but I've seen I've seen a number of South African sort of metal bands come through the UK and sort of, seen them at shows and whatnot. So, which is great. I'm glad that like, what effectively all us old fuckers created back in the day has had some sort of lasting legacy that continues, and sort of the bands are still trying to get out there and do what they need to. I think it's fucking right. You know what I mean? It's South Africa always had like a really, really fucking good music scene, if you ask me.
We had a great scene, bro. I think
we did.
Yeah. It's good to see that carry over.
Doku made that short little video the other day. He said, we didn't have a scene in South Africa. We had a family. And we worked with each other. I thought he was so spot on, man.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you guys, Greg, coming up, I think coming up, and I think you guys slept on the floor of my flat in Hillbrow. I think I can remember all of you guys crashed out on my fucking floor, like, sort of, and getting a little bit shit-faced as well.
Very much so. So I think the essence for me is obviously to start off with Yuppie terrorist pigeon feeders, and Johan's going to ask you guys obviously his questions like how you got into the whole scene, and then we'll move on to Retribution, and then afterwards I will probably just touch the Sacrifist was a Paul on the end, but we'll do another Sacrifist thing later for sure with the rest of the guys in the band. But I think for me personally is like I only knew Retribution Denied, and then I later discovered Yuppie Pigeon Terrorist Feeders when Paul actually posted it on fucking Facebook. I was like, I heard that name before, and people were like, who the fuck are these guys? I said, no.
And you know what, Greg? Up until today, you just proved it. You know how many people twisted their tongues with that one, eh? At the end of the day, we just say, you know what? Keep it at YTPF. It's going to be better for you.
And then you've got it. Yeah, guys, look, I'm not going to faff around too much. You've seen probably some of the other videos. I think what the gist is really what we're trying to do is tell the story. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but basically the whole trigger, just to do catch up for you guys if you don't know. Years ago, a documentary was done by Sam Dunn, and it pretty much sort of circumnavigated the entire beginnings and origins of the SA scene, and it's just something we kept discussing, and we thought, oh my God, that's such an injustice. And it keeps happening to this day. There was something about Namibia. I was later on active in Namibia with my band, and it was just kind of, somebody went around and actually tried to do this, thing about Namibian metal and stuff, and it was everything mentioned but, the originators. It's just what's happening now, and they're all claiming the spotlight. So long story short, this is our time to shed some light on the beginnings and the bands that actually laid the groundwork.
And you know what? I've been following this whole thing, and Johan, what you and Greg are doing, fuck, man, it's phenomenal. We carry on with our lives, and you tend to forget all these things. I mean, what are we talking? 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, and you forget about it, and then you start unlocking memories, and you're skin. Oh man, remember that, and boom, your mind just blows, and we're fucking kids again. Thank you for that.
Pleasure. I must add here in this spot, we've had a lot of help from Mark and Gene. They've opened another door completely. I mean, Greg and me our minds were boggled when we heard about, like I say every time, a handful of other bands that were. Look, in my universe, it all started with Odyssey and the tapes that made it to Namibia through the army in Walvis Bay. Yeah. That was Strider.
Mark, I speak to Mark basically on a daily basis. And that oak is a treasure trove of music, across the scene. And it's just, it's amazing to see what that man just brings out.
Yeah, we speak to Philip Nell on a daily basis, or Anka, and he told us that James is actually the fucking expert on shit.
Yeah, but James as well. I was thinking about this, and I was gonna think to myself, I know Johan's gonna start asking questions, and I'm gonna just sit back and I'm gonna you know what? If James tell the stories, I'll fill in where, because James is also, you can see he's been there since the beginning of time, and
I can just give you a kick off. Basically, I think what to kick it off is what always mystifies me is, because I know from myself there was this trigger point that sort of kicked it off, where I said I saw somebody live and I thought, oh yeah, that's it, and that's the shit I want to do. So I guess the question is, what was the kickoff factor for you?
I mean, for me, sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one, because I came up as a punk kid. I was much more into punk rock. Metal sort of came much further down the line through the lens of sort of grindcore and death metal. To this day, somebody puts an Iron Maiden record on, I'm going to walk out the room, because it just doesn't fucking interest me at all. To this day, I still prefer harder, more undergroundy, more sort of fucking nervy, edgy music.
Well, let's just say that Maiden didn't get any better, did they?
No, but I mean, it's the same thing. All that sort of dad rock stuff just didn't really appeal to me. Appeal to me. And and I think for me, my start on it was really when I lived in Germiston, as a teenager, and I went, I was going to all the punk clubs when I was 16, 17 years old. To Subway and Decadence, and fucking quite a few of those places.
Subway.
So yeah, I mean Subway for sure. I was there every fucking weekend. Yeah. And then then obviously Club Image opened, and and I sort of knew Dutchman Dave, who was the DJ there. I'd sort of met him over the years. Yeah. And Dave said to me, I then moved to Hillbrow, you know what I mean? So, I was living in Hillbrow down the road from him, so we used to hang out a lot together. And Dave was like, I don't really want to DJ anymore. I'm bored of it. I'm bored of the punk scene. So, I'm going to resign, and and that's that, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, cool. And he said, look, give me some money. You can have my whole record collection and you can DJ for us then. And I was like, all right. So, he had maybe 1,000 records or something. And I was like, okay, cool. And then nothing really happened. And then maybe a month later, one of my mates from Germiston says, oh yeah, you got to be at Club Image on Friday night because you're DJing. And I was like, hang on a second, nobody's fucking talked to me about this. How did that come about? And so I ended up going in and sort of doing that, and sort of and as soon as I was in there, like the same club was sort of Toxic Sox's rehearsal room, so I obviously got to know those guys pretty well. And
Great band. Fucking great
yeah. I mean, and obviously for me, I used to go and hang out there during the day. When I was a kid, I started playing drums as like a really young child and never really followed it. And then all of a sudden, like there's a kit in the club all day, so I just started playing drums all day every day. Because I was either sitting in my flat smoking weed and getting pissed, or I'd go to the club and sort of play drums. And I didn't really play with anybody; it was just me by myself. But then sort of Brad came out the army. He had gone in for a stint, and we had sort of kept in touch. We went to the same primary school together. And sort of, and he sort of said to me like, "Hey, dude, like, I really want to start a band." And I was like, and he wanted to play guitar, and it was sort of pretty obvious, like when we had a few little jams, and sort of, that he wasn't going to really play guitar, and he sort of switched over to the bass, and then sort of, and then from there we sort of had Andre join and Steve join, and formed like, and we struggled for a band name. So the whole history of Yuppie Terrorist Pigeon Feeders is that I wanted to call the band the Yuppie Terrorist Association, and Brad wanted to call the band the Pigeon Feeders Club. And we just went like, we couldn't agree, so we just mashed the two names together, and that's where it came from.
But Steve was the vocalist, eh?
Yeah.
That's the dude with at the time when they did the in-house recordings. He's the guy with the short black hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Cut off. Yeah. We called him off, didn't we?
Your mate, are you referring to Roland Raker here?
No, I mean, no. It was actually somebody within the scene, like, like a personal friend. It was like in our same age group and whatnot. And they'd sort of basically had a chat with Roland about, Roland was like, fuck, my DJ's left. And, sort of, and he's going to sell me all the records, but I really just want to fucking get somebody else to come and deal with all this. So there's actually a friend, like, I think it was more than one of them, because it was a little group of us in Germiston that used to party all the time together. And it was one of them that said, "Hey, we've volunteered you in for this, fucking off you trot." And obviously I had like my own record, like small record collection at the time as well. So that's how that came about. I hadn't met Roland really until the point I started really working at the club.
Yeah, he's like a for me, I always insisted if we're going to do this documentary, I mean, I'm really trying to get him. Messaged him a few times to try and get hold of Roland Raker, mate, because I mean, the influence, he's like the Paul Freebury of Cape Town. He started all the clubs in Cape Town where all the punks and metalheads and I mean, Roland, he laid the foundation of the clubs in Joburg.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean,
he helped us out a lot, all of us.
Paul, I always maintain he's the first person in Johannesburg who paid for VOD, and we were fucking just starting out in Cape Town as a punk band. I don't even know how he heard of us, and he paid for us to come up to Johannesburg countless times. Paid all the fuel, fucking the whole trip. I mean, we drove in my combi and all that shit. We went to Club Image to play some of our first gigs there.
Killer.
And I mean, Roland just he would always just bring us back to Johannesburg 2-3 times a year, and I mean, he was a stalwart in getting the scene together. In my mind, his clubs.
Definitely, I agree. Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think like for Roland, I mean, obviously I got to know him really well because I worked on and off with him for several years. And I mean, to be honest with you, we never saw really eye to eye. Like,
he's a crazy guy.
He's quite a fucking sort of crazy dude in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
But he was really, I think he was quite passionate about, the punk scene and the, sort of the underground music scene. I think he felt more attuned to that, like the commercial sort of dance, pop music scene. And, and I think for him, the turning point was doing that big thing at Portuguese Hall in the south of Joburg, where, he hired out a massive fucking, sort of sports hall and absolutely packed it out, you know what I mean? And sort of, punk and golf.
He also organized, people think of the Thunderdome. I mean, Roland Raker Productions is actually, I put those shows on with No Friends of Harry. That's one of his first gigs in Johannesburg was at the Thunderdome. That's when Dickon played with us first. And that was also Roland Raker Productions. I mean, he really went fucking to the. I mean, he put his money's where his yeah. For sure.
I used to work all those shows at the Thunderdome because you'd sort of come in and go like, oh, do you want to fucking come and DJ it with Barney Simon or something, and sort of. And I actually done my one and only ever show with Toxic Socks as their vocalist.
Yeah.
At the Thunderdome as well, you know what I mean? Like, so, which was pretty wild because obviously I've known them for a long time by then. And Anthony, their vocalist, moved to the UK. He ended up being a really big, like a bigwig in Sony Music in London. But, when he left, they were like, oh, we still want to carry on gigging. And I was like, oh, and Roland sort of came to me and said, oh, do you want to sing for these guys? And I was like, I'm not a fucking singer, but, let's give it a try anyway. As you do when you're young and a punk and sort of,
I mean, I think you and I probably come from the same school. I wasn't very much into fucking the typical British punk at that time. I mean, for me, it was like exploited. I used to fucking hate people with exploited t-shirts. GBH, I could maybe tolerate. Discharge, obviously I would. I was into Swedish hardcore, like Anti-Cymex and Filthy Christians and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, same as me.
And I wanted to be brutal, like
fucking everything's not like
early heresy and that sort of stuff, like extreme noise terror stuff. Yeah, and I think that's where I've got to look at the screen to get the name right again. Yuppie, terrorist, pigeon feeders. I think that's what's the mantra with you guys was basically. You didn't want to do like GBH.
I think what happened was that like me and Brad both came from like, we were both really into our punk stuff. Mm-hmm. And Andre at the time, who had a massive Mohican at the time. I don't know if you've ever seen photos of Andre with his Mohican back in the day.
And Ray von Rensburg, eh?
Yeah. And he was really into like sort of, like the early American hardcore, you know what I mean? But, but he was also into like the really noisy sort of, sort of European stuff as well. So, but he was quite into like bands like Agnostic Front and sort of, SOD and that sort of ilk, you know what I mean? Because they were all like mid-80s bands, right? But yeah, then obviously, sort of, Steve came along and Steve was again more into the punk stuff. But he sort of ended up much more into like sort of, going down the road like Godflesh and sort of, slightly more sort of doomy stuff as well as the extreme sort of stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, sort of, and I think that was the basis of YTPF. And then, we sort of recorded our demo in like my mate's rehearsal room in the fucking,
that was called 1991. It's called Pigeonus Brutalis.
That's it. Yeah. Brutal Pigeons. There you go.
Yeah.
And, I think we recorded that on like a 4-track Porter studio. So it was just endlessly bouncing tracks down to get what we done. And it was really, really sort of rudimentary. But then obviously we started playing a few gigs around town at that point. Obviously Paul was, from Germiston, and we sort of got to know each other from that point as well. So we sort of basically sort of went to the point where we're going like, okay, we want to actually make a go of it because we're actually getting like a bit of response from people and, we're sort of obviously like a unique band because we're fucking full on extreme and sort of, nobody's doing what we're doing.
James, just for the sake of Johan and also for the viewers, I guess, it's like you guys knew what it sounded like, but see, I have never heard that demo. So what was the style at that time? Was it sort of Napalm Deathish?
It was very much more punky orientated.
Okay.
Didn't have blast beats per se. It was much more punky and sort of, upbeat punk, I suppose. You know what I mean? Like the whole metal influence and that grind influence hadn't quite hit. That sort of hit when sort of, as we progressed as a band, and we all got used to each other, I suppose, like any band, you all get used to each other's writing style and you all start talking a bit more about it.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, like, I think at that point, like Andre and I were like fucking going batshit over like extreme noise terror and fucking early napalm death. And we were like, we want to be doing that. So we became a lot more grindcore-y straight away and then sort of changed the name to Retribution Denied because, we wanted to make a go of it and fucking Mr.
So anybody got a copy of that still?
I don't know.
Mark
All
Van-
my fucking tapes, South African tapes, got nicked in South Africa. Every single one of them.
Verster's got a copy of that.
Has he?
Yeah, he must have. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got.
So if you had to classify that demo, that Brutalis demo, would you say it's like, give me a equivalent sort of British band that sounded similar? What was it like?
I don't know. I mean, like we were like quite, as I say, it was quite punky. So we were going along the probably somewhere like sort of conflicty, I suppose. It's quite punky, but it was a bit more upbeat. So it wasn't like like sort of oi punk or whatever. It was just a bit more sort of hardcore than that.
GBHE?
Yeah, sort of, I'd say that verging towards Discharge and stuff like that. And certainly at the time, those were really like the influences that we had. We were all really into like Crass and Conflict and Discharge.
So, I mean, YT, fuck, I'm going to get it wrong. Fucking whatever, Yuppie, terrorist, Pigeon, breeders or whatever.
Breeders,
so
yeah.
it was like a year, right? Basically a year. And then, so where did the decision, or how did the decision come about to swap into Retribution?
Well, we as I say, over that sort of, I'd say it's probably more like 2 years because we were jamming together for a while before we obviously produced that demo. And then we sort of, and sort of then we produced the demo and then we carried on jamming and sort of, we realized we were getting good reaction. And we thought like
we actually played a couple of live shows as YTPF. I mean, for a long time, a year and a half. And Philip Nelson found us 2 years. Philip Nelson found us, and that's sort of where the whole transition came. With the change of the name, as well as the change of the music style. That's when it actually gone over to more the grindcore.
Your last gig at with White was with Urban Assault and you guys at Club 5 in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
The Gresham Hotel.
It was in November, sort of November-ish, 1991.
Yeah. Gresham Hotel.
Yeah.
Still
so then you guys just dumped the whole YTPF thing and just decided. So who came up with the name Retribution the Night? It was a fucking classic fucking metal name.
And the next question: who came up with the logo?
James.
Guilty as charged.
They're all
What had happened was. Go on, sorry, Paul. Go.
No. I'm just like James would always. Hey, I've got this fucking great idea for a band name. Okay, well, let's hear it. Retribution Tonight. Oh, fuck, that rules. And I've got a logo already. Okay, well, we're done. Let's,
Yeah, he was as good as good a salesman as me, man. The people always say Greg is always a fucking salesman. I would have that. I'd come to people with an idea already preconceived. I've got all the fucking answers.
I mean, what happened was I started doing like a little fanzine with a mate, you know what I mean? Like, so, and, and we thought like, let's do like a letters column and just, we'll just take the piss out of people, letters column, make it a bit funny. So, so we sort of said, what do we call the letters column? And I sort of turned around and went, Retribution Tonight. You're going to write to us like an agony aunt. But then the fanzine never came together and the Retribution Tonight stuck in my head and sort of became the band name.
And a well-crafted logo at that.
It's got that every tone of death metal with just by default. It's like a death metal logo,
and it's still legible. It's
legible.
Yeah,
That was the art back then. Nowadays it looks like a bowl of spaghetti thrown against the wall.
Yeah, like the British.
Yeah. Yeah, but James, in those days, you had to draw that by hand, eh?
Yeah, that was, I drew it by hand.
Yeah.
And then sort of, then fucked around with it once I'd drawn it, you know what I mean? And sort of scaled it up and down with a photocopier and all that shit back in the day, you know what I mean?
All day. So this was the beginning of '92, right? So you guys, the Pigeons flew away, and immediately you guys, the whole band, all the members just crossed into Retribution because James sold it to them.
Yeah, I think we sort of, I think at the time, we had all been discussing for a long time that we weren't, what we had started as was quite a punky band, wasn't really where we were headed. And I think certainly when Paul joined the band, and Paul was like, probably our you were all like sort of, metal guy, you know what I mean? Like you came in with like all the metal phrasing and the licks and everything. And we sort of adopted that, Andre got really on board with it because it sort of married up in his head with his love of stuff like SOD and stuff in the background, Creator and Sodom, which we're all big fans of,
Yeah.
But Paul ultimately came in and, he was like much more into the metal scene than the rest of us. And we realized that we could, put Paul's influence into the band as well as our own, and we'd come up with this sort of like grinding death metal sort of thing, which is sort of where we ended up, you know what I mean? So
Paul, I've already heard you grew up in Germiston, right?
Yeah.
Well, how did you get into metal, my bro?
Fuck, bro, that is... Initially I was like more into the gothic scene, and mid-high schoolish got into like the Metallicas and all that shit, and it basically just grew till you hear Creator. Creator is like one of my ultimate bands. You hear a band like Creator. Creator was but we'll get to that. Creator was my main influence to starting Sacrifist, but you listen to that and then everything just opens up and you think, fuck.
Coma of Souls. Yeah.
Hey man, Coma of Souls was the reason for...
That's a great album.
For everything. Coma of Souls was the reason for everything. It was I think it occupied my mind for the majority of the time before the next album, and it was just something else. And I started getting seriously into my guitaring. I've been playing since I was 8 years old, and I actually started taking it up. The first time I heard Yngwie Malmsteen, I was like, boom, what the fuck is this? And I jumped into that, and I was never really into all the heavy stuff that James and them were into. And I was walking down the street in Germiston with my guitar, and I had this lightning bolt shaped guitar, and I was walking in the street and Brad was across the road, and he looked at me and he came across the road, walked up to me. Hey dude, that's a nice guitar, can you play it? I said, you can play it. He says, well, 44 Menon Road, Saturday, if you want to be in a band, be there.
Yeah.
Saturday,
famous band room, right?
And it was like
that's the way.
44 Menon Road, Saturday. If you want to be in a band, be there. And he fucks off. He's gone. I saw him on Saturday. And
you turned up, bro. You fucking went for it.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
So what happened on that day, James and Paul? I mean, so you walked in with his guitar, and you guys fucking.
I mean, we just started exchanging ideas, if I remember correctly. And sort of, we realized that actually, like what Paul was doing and sort of where we were going was sort of in a similar direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we realized, sort of that probably like, sort of for us as a band that was like, maybe, we're pretty chaotic, think of Extreme Noise Terror, it's like a totally chaotic band. And that's sort of where we were at that point. And we realized that Paul coming in and sort of, and actually settling the music a bit more would actually settle the band a little bit more as well. You know what I mean? And so, I think for me, Paul's influence coming into the band was a really positive thing. And I was like totally for it because I could see that actually, that we could actually create something. Because by this time, like, we had started listening to a lot of death metal, Bolt Thrower, Carcass. So we realized that was actually more the direction that we felt that we could go because it had the balance of sort of the metal-y stuff with the balance of the chaos of like the sort of grindcore, hardcore-y stuff. So we could just see it being like a really good marriage, I think, sort of, and I don't know. I think Paul probably thought we were all just fucking crazy at the time, but
it was insane for me because, it was insane for me because here I am. I'm used to all this structured guitaring and palm muting and, like, and I'm standing and I'm listening to this band going,
Yeah.
and it's like fucking boom. And it's like, Andre, what about if you and it sort of like calmed down, but it was chaos, but it was calm, and it was fuck it. I thought, geez, listen to this band. I want to be in this band,
Controlled chaos.
And okay, well, dude, see you next Saturday again.
So did you guys have like a preconceived idea? So you mentioned Bolt Thrower and all these bands. So, hey, let me just say at this point that Retribution Tonight was the first death metal band from Joburg. There's without a doubt. But it's interesting because at that time, I mean, death metal was ruled by the Florida. I mean, Johannes more an expert on this scene, like the whole Florida, like Obituary and all those bands. But you mentioned bands like Bolt Thrower and all the British. Yeah.
Greg, Bolt Thrower, when James sort of like introduced me to Bolt Thrower, and that band just, there was always something about it. Us being in South Africa, you hear all these bands, we're stupid. We were dumb that time. We knew nothing. If you wanted to find something or work out something, take your needle off your record and play it back. And there is no music notes. There's no nothing, Yeah. And I was always listening to Bolt Thrower, and saying to James, I said, there's something about this band that we're not getting right. We're doing it, but we're not getting it right. Can you remember, James?
Yeah, I remember it well.
I said to him, you know what? I'm pretty sure these oaks are detuning their guitars. They're tuning in another key. And look, detuning wasn't heard of. We knew nothing about it, And we were in the studio at in-house, and I mentioned it to Phil. He said to me, no, you can't do that. It won't work. And he left, and I took Andre's guitar and I took Brad's bass, and we tuned down to D. I mean, Bolt Thrower goes down to B, C, and I tuned down to D, and we played one of our songs, and it was like, fuck me, listen to this.
Yeah. Let me tell you a little secret here. What you guys don't know is, remember Greg's an old punk. So remember my first gig was with 2 strings, bro. I only played 2 strings. And then by the time I got to Joburg, I was playing on 4 strings. Okay?
I remember that, actually. I remember us talking about it.
No, I remember it as well. So, and I would like to claim the fact that we were like the first band to also detune. And we kept that a secret because everybody was practicing it in-house. And, even though we were practicing at different places, we never let it out because we took sort of like a month's hiatus when we changed the name.
Yeah.
And when we played the first show as Retribution Denied, I think it was at Wings. If I recall,
no, Wings was later, bro. Wings was later. Yeah.
Because it was
the first flyer I ever found of Retribution was 10th of October 1982. Yeovil. You played with Urban Assault, Axe, Debauchery, Retribution, Abhorrence. I guess that's the Philip Nell time. So there must have been.
Yes, it could be that.
Yeah. There's definitely shows before that. Actually, our first show as Retribution was at Club Image because we had the contact with Roland. And I can remember being on stage like fucking, at Club Image, and the guy that I hired the sound system from, he gave us like a Ramza sound system, which at the time was like brand new technology.
That was the shit.
Like fucking small speaker boxes instead of these massive ones. And we literally fucking ripped the roof off the place because it was just so loud compared to a normal gig in there. But I can specifically remember that because I remember some guy on the dance floor. Oh man, I got behind the drum kit just before the show just to go fucking tweak it. You know what I mean? And some guy, I started just tapping out to whatever the DJ was playing. And it was like a Young God song. And some young kid came from the audience and said, "We know you're a drummer. Stop playing that." And then then we went into it because I remember we had to fucking, those 2 pillars in front of the stage were a major problem for us. That's what I mean. I might be wrong, but that's what I remember. It's a long time ago.
No, you're right. And I just remember, I mean, we were the first band that actually went on stage that were detuned. And after that, everybody was like asking me, what the fuck did you Oaks do? What did you do? I mean, Debauchery was playing, and everybody's in standard E.
Yeah.
And we went, we came in at D, you know.
Paul, I'll cut this out because it's not relevant to the interview, but I know that old Johan, when he joined the band too, and Dickon, and when they were in the band, they used to fucking hate me because I always tuned naturally to D, actually a D minor. It's just my natural tone. And when Johan joined the band first, it really fucked him up in the beginning. Like he was like, yes, okay, hang on. So I had to, Dickon, everybody had to, Dickon used to bitch like a fucking bitch because for a bass guitarist to tune down another notch, I mean, the string starts slapping and shit like that.
Really,
then it's string gauge, but the big thing was with guitars was intonation. And that's a while to figure that out.
And you know,
the higher chords, it's like.
So Paul, my brother, you and I'm truly brothers because you see that was also VOD secret. If you listen to any of the VOD stuff, you'll realize it's in D. It's not in an E. I didn't even know what the fucking standard tuning was because I tuned to quarter tunings, which is completely different. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and to this day, I play in quarter tunings. So
you know, at that time when we started playing all these fancy guitars with the Floyd Roses.
I had to take the springs of my Floyd Rose, and they're normally like 3 springs to the back, straight. I used to have to pull them from all 3 to the point. Level. And I played heavy jazz strings, bro, like 50. The heaviest strings I could get, Darius.
Just hold on quickly. Whilst we've talked now about you dropping the strings and stuff, let's talk about Mixer Inherit the Earth. It was the first release.
Yeah, I mean that was like the follow-up.
And this is now where obviously Philip came in.
Yeah.
But how did that?
Part of the name change was sort of the fact that sort of Philip had offered us a deal. And we didn't really want to go with Yuppie Terrace Pigeon Feeders anymore because we didn't feel it was representative. So that was also part of the, the name change to move on. And again, sort of, the style that we were playing, thanks to Paul's influence, it also changed up. So we just didn't really feel that it would be like good to go and do a, YTPF sort of recording, because it didn't really represent sort of, where we were, sort of musically. And I think even personally, I think like all of us were a bit like, that was a fun gig. And it sort of got us to a place where we understood what each other was doing. But now we need to move on from that and sort of,
We still took a lot of the old YTPF songs and basically just zooshed them up, to the new feel, to the new sound, the new vibe. And
that's what I was going to ask. Is how many of the songs did you guys carry over from YPTF into all of them?
Yeah, I mean,
you just reworked them.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, because when we made the name change, we realized that part of the name change was the fact that like the songs that we had started as YTPF no longer sounded like YTPF because we had sort of changed our style a little bit. Had that influence coming in, so it was more about moving on. So those songs sort of grew with the style as well. And
you started working with Enos Records at that time, or
I did. Sort of what had happened was that like myself and Brad, from quite early on, outside of like actually sort of jamming together, we'd been sort of in contact with a lot of like fanzines, with doing a lot of like tape trading and sort of, a lot of people were like just totally amazed there was even fucking punk rock in South Africa. So we were doing a lot of like that sort of stuff. And through that, I sort of started meeting a lot of sort of the global players, that sort of, so, Matt that owns Relapse Records, for instance, like I ended up being a pen pal buddy with him. And sort of, the guys from Century Media, the guys from Nuclear Blast, sort of a lot of the labels, Morbid Records that you guys ended up releasing through the Casting, those were all came from
Your
like,
connections. Those were your
yeah,
connections.
yeah.
That's what
I mean,
Philip was
you know,
saying,
but it
yeah.
wasn't like at the time you didn't think it was connections. They were just fucking pen pals. So, you know, so that's where that sort of all came from. And when I went to work with Philip, it was more to try and develop that sort of international style of things and sort of, you know, and start trying to get the SA band some exposure to outside of the country, you know what I mean? And weirdly, I don't know what Philip said in his interview, I didn't watch it, but we actually got really fucking close to Nuclear Blast releasing The Death of Africa. I mean, like they literally got to like within a week of signing the deal, and then Philip torpedoed it because he asked for too much money, and it sort of all went away.
Okay.
It went through SBV at the end of the day, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but like, you know, but Nuclear Blast were actually going to license the whole release and release it as a Nuclear Blast release. You know, sort of through Marcus, who's the guy that started Nuclear Blast. You know, so that's what I was working with.
Marcus Steiger.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
The European crowd, the most memorable release, or the first time they realized that there was something seriously fucking happening in South Africa, was with the Death of Africa CD.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah,
It's still very talked about.
Yeah.
Among insiders, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, sort of. So yeah, I ended up just working with Phil, trying to develop like the international side. But then Phil was like, "No, I don't want to spend money on distributing another label's product in South Africa. I just want to spend my money on actually South African bands." And I was like, you know, so we didn't sort of see eye to eye because I was like, you know, it's like one's a means to another, if you see what I'm saying. If you can get a label in Europe that's going to like help you punt your releases out, your bands are going to get much further, much quicker than you trying to be in a captured state.
For us, that turned out to be a good thing because, I mean, that was our connection through to Morbid Records. And,
of course.
you know, I mean, the rest is history. So, I mean, you guys did the Meek Shall Inherit the Earth demo with Philip. Yeah, and then you did the Death of Africa, and then we did the tape afterwards. And then in 1995, you guys released, in the beginning, there was the cassette. Was that, you broke away from Philip then, and you guys released that on your own?
Well, I think by that stage, I had left the band. You know, sort of, you know, we had actually done a really cool recording for a song called Death May Die, which, you know, I think it actually appeared on the release, like sort of in another version, but we actually sort of
was also out by then. I was running full time with Sacrifist then.
Yeah. You know, and sort of, we done like sort of Death May Die, like with Philip Nell, and we had like, you know, and it was sort of like I don't know, I suppose the best way to describe it was, you know, sort of Bolt Thrower meets My Dying Bride, because we started having a lot of Doom influences. So we had a guy like cello over it, and it was fucking, I mean, it sounded great, but then Philip binned it, so we never sort of like...
You still played on that demo, right? That was a cassette you guys released in 1995, so you still played on that. So that wasn't recorded at Ineos Records, was it?
No.
And then in 1999, you guys brought out Songs of Soul and Psyche. Or Psyche.
Yeah, so that was actually like, so, you know, I mean, I'd already moved to the UK, as I had, you know, I think Steve had moved to the UK already as well. And actually, like, that had been recorded a long time earlier, but it only sort of saw the light of day quite late. And a lot of that material was material that, like, we actually wrote in the early days of Retribution.
So I think some of the songs that were on there were still from songs that I, that I was still writing with you guys at that time still. I remember, absolutely. When that came out, I thought, geez, these are old songs, you know.
Yeah.
But they were never done by the time I left.
At the time of 1992, I mean, that was the fucking, in my mind, one of the best times in South African metal. And no matter how we look at it, Uncle Philip Nell, I mean, he was really fucking punting South African metal. And all the fucking great bands that, Strider, Debauchery, Abhorrence even, Sepsis even recorded with Philip. And then,
Funeral.
So how did the dissolution arrive? Like how?
I think that, like, you know, when we'd done the song called Death May Die, which was actually supposed to be on like there was going to be another Death of Africa, like a volume 2, which is going to be much more, instead of having bands like having 2 or 3 tracks on it, it was going to be like individual bands, because now there was more bands in the scene. And a bunch of us, like a bunch of the Joburg and Pretoria bands, all went in to record at Universal Studios, which is where Phil, I mean, you guys recorded there as well. And that was the idea, was that there was going to be another Death of Africa, but this time much more expanded, many more bands on it.
Fuck, I didn't even know that, mate. That would
Yeah. And like, honestly, I don't know what happened with Phil, but he sort of just decided he wasn't going to go forward with it anymore. And that was the time that he started pulling out of like actually doing any releases of South African metal. For a long time, he just didn't do anything. But then he also dumped all the masters and the multi-tracks of the bands that had recorded, because he just went like, if I'm not going to release it, you're not going to have it. And boom, he wiped the tapes.
You wiped the tapes?
Yeah.
Holy fuck, bro. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so because there was like a lot of bands that were in that. There was like Urban Assault was in it. There was like a load of bands, like Joburg bands, that actually went in and recorded like a unique single track. But I knew that because I used to work in Universal Studios. Like Phil trained me as a sound engineer to help him out running the studio.
Like Urban Assault, I guess, was one of them, or name some of the bands. Yeah.
I can't even remember. I'll have to look through my notes. But there was like, I think there was Abhorrence, there was Funeral, Debauchery, I think, was booked to come in but never done anything. I can't remember. I have to look at my notes. There were several bands. I mean, we went in and actually fully recorded our track. We had finished it.
You know, Johan, that's one question we've never discussed with Philip, is how did In-House Records basically disband? Or so you say there was like 1993, 1994, around there?
Yeah, I mean, he just sort of, I mean, I don't know what happened, sort of, I wasn't really party to it, but, I think he just sort of, I think at the time there was a lot of pushback, like sort of, from some of the bands. Several bands wanted to go their own way. I know that you guys wanted to go your own way. Groinchurn wanted to do the same. Metamorphosis, obviously, like they had their own plans. And I think like sort of Phil just sort of had a bit of a freak out about it and went like, that's it, I'm out. I don't know how much he felt that. That's just my opinion of what happened. So, Phil can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But certainly it was like, it became like a, sort of a not great scenario. And and basically I know that he went and wiped the tapes because he told me. He said, like, all those songs were recorded, I'm out, so I've just wiped all the tapes in the studio.
Fuck, that's quite fucking crazy, bro.
That's intense, eh? That's really intense.
Yeah, but I mean, that's where Phil was at that point in his life, you know what I mean? I think he was...
Yeah, I'm speechless. It's like, we actually asked him...
Makes sense now, eh?
It makes sense now. Yeah.
I don't know if he wiped all the previous stuff, but he definitely wiped the stuff that had been recorded for what was going to be the Death of Africa Volume 2. And sort of, so there was definitely that happened because,
His point of view was, he financed the recordings at Universal Studios out of his own pocket. He put on gigs, he had to hire PA systems and fucking put on bands. So, I mean, and I understand it. I'm fucking old enough to understand it these days. I mean, he forked out more than we were expecting. I mean, he carried all the costs and also all the liability of, and I think you obviously helped him a lot with his distribution, James. But I mean, he I don't know how many copies of each tape he released, but I mean, he managed to distribute them pretty fucking well. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, sort of when I was working with them, we were doing like a lot of tape trading. So we were trading stock for stock with labels. So we were trading like stock with like Peaceful, with Nuclear Blast, with like a lot of the, so we're just, tape trade like, or, we'd get stuff back from those labels. And that's how those cassettes ended up like sort of flying around the world a lot, because they were going to, Totsuan from SOB in Japan took a load of stuff because I've been tape trading with him. The guys from like sort of, Morbid were taking stuff through Carsten, but I had stuff out in Mexico. I had people in South America taking stuff off us as well. So, but it was all through the tape trading network, and a few at that time were like sort of establishing labels, there was no, I suppose at that time, the only really big labels were like Roadrunner, maybe Earache, that were on the way up because they had like so many fucking bands that just sort of crushed into the scene. But even at the time, Nuclear Blast was still quite a mom and pop label. They'd only done like maybe 20, 30 releases, so, but yeah, I mean, it was, there was a lot of interest. That's the thing. Like, that's what I was passionate about, was the fact that there was loads of interest from, international sources and what was happening in South Africa. But I think in the end, from that perspective, it sort of collapsed a little bit. There was a lot of infighting amongst bands about like, who should be the top of the food chain or whatever.
I'm going to speak off the top of my head now. And I would honestly say, I'm a good judge of character, things like that. I think that's what you brought to Inas Records, because Philip would not have had those connections with. We punks come from a tape trading underground network, and we knew how to. That's how VOD. Yeah. I mean, I ran my own distribution companies when VOD started.
Yeah,
that's how we used to distribute fucking tapes and zines and shit like that. So that's what you were doing at Inas Records.
Yeah, and like and I suppose like what we are getting in return is that like we are getting a lot of like very brand new releases out of the European and the American scene, which were then getting fed back to like to the people in the South African scene. And all of a sudden, like, sort of the influences the bands were putting out became much more on point because they were exposed to stuff much quicker than before. Like, like Paul was saying, it was like, it was really fucking hard to find, we didn't know anything. To find international releases was actually really hard at one point.
So I guess, and I'm taking a calculated guess that Inas Records newsletter where they used to publish what's coming in, what's being released, that was probably run by you, right?
Yeah, well, it was a mixture of me and Phil, to be honest with you. I mean, Phil was obviously, I'd sort of help him make that stuff up, but like, but Phil was like, still the main geezer of the label. I was trying to sort of act as like a sort of a liaison for him between my international tape trading sources and sort of fledgling labels that I dealt with, but also act as like, to try and help him, sort of deal with like, trying to book gigs, because that wasn't really his thing, but obviously thanks to the fact that I slaved under Roland Breaker for some time, I'd sort of built up like, again, sort of a lot of connections, Mike Gill from Urban Assault.
Yes.
Built up a really good collection of like venues that were like.
That's a difficult band to get hold of, mate.
Yeah.
Almost impossible to get hold of. I mean, they also come from the punk roots, so which I appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, but yeah, so it was a very different time, and sort of,
So where was Retribution's last gig?
I mean, that was long after I left the band. I was already in the UK when they'd done their last gig, which was.
You replaced you as a drummer then?
Ray. I think it was Ray.
Ray, yeah.
And then Colin played after that because, Ray came in. He sort of done a lot of stuff, and then he left. I don't know. It's so long ago. I can't remember. But I know that Colin who was another one of our sort of mates. He was mates with Stephen, the singer, and he came in and filled in and like sort of for the last like year or so.
So this was 1995.
I know they played like the Randburg Waterfront was their last ever show. They played in one of the bars at the Randburg Waterfront.
This was 95, eh, Paul? When
I wasn't there. I was already out. I was running big time with Sacrifist then. We were doing our own thing. I think we were still playing.
You basically left the band, in 1995, Paul?
92, 93.
Yeah, I think you done like.
No, look, there was a point. There was a point where I was playing for Retribution Denied and Sacrifist on the same venue.
Wow.
Yeah, I should remember that. You guys, I arranged Sacrifist, your first ever show was supporting Retribution.
Correct, yes, it was correct. So I get off stage. I remember Sacrifist was like was a 4-piece band. I was doing rhythm, lead guitaring, and vocals. And I'd get off stage. We just opened for Retribution Denied, and I get back on stage playing for Retribution Denied. It was insane.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list of gigs here. The first gig I see was at Club LSD, Retribution Tonight, Electric Sheep, Agro Grannies, Gargoyle, and Sacrifist.
Yeah,
in June 1994, you guys played Sacrifist and Retribution. Yeah,
there was a big one.
1994.
Devil's Music Rock Orgy or something like that.
Yeah. That was the one that had aggro on it as well. It was like the first aggro.
It was a big one.
Played.
It was quite a big one.
It was called Aggro Grannies then, weren't they?
Yeah. Another one that got raided.
Yeah.
Debauchery, because when I heard Killer Ducks and all the stuff from Debauchery, and then I've heard from one of the guys Debauchery, they sort of the whole Debauchery band was kind of a joke. They just did it as
it was a satirical band. Yeah.
You know, they weren't serious about it.
Yeah, I mean, I always got on really well with those guys. You know, sort of. I thought that they, I suppose back in the day you had like Spastic Blur and you had Metal Duck and all those sort of bands, and that was like, they were sort of ascribing to that sort of way of doing it, Lawnmower Death, I suppose.
Jesus, a name I haven't heard in a long time.
They wanted to do like something a bit more tongue in cheek, but like, I don't know, I really enjoyed what they'd done. I mean, it was like hard, fast, and fucking heavy as all shit. So
yeah, they came across, to me, very DSID. The very
fucking really heavy.
A lot of DSID feel. Look, not the emotion around the music, but the music feel to me was very DSID like. But like, there was a lyrical side to it.
So, Paul, you would say basically you guys went for more like a British death metal, like bolt thrower style. Yeah. And they went more for the sort of Tampa, Florida.
To me, I would sign that right away. I mean, it definitely has more of a, if you listen to early bolt thrower stuff and the early UK stuff, that's more in line with Retribution, I think. And then the Necrosis and those guys went more for the Tampa sound.
Tampa, Florida.
Early Cannibal, Baphomet, those kind of bands now.
Yeah.
I think Cannibal Corpse influence.
Yeah. I think that myself and Andre in particular, and Brad, I suppose, to a degree, I mean, we were just fucking massive fans of like Bolt Thrower, like literally.
From the beginning.
Literally, I like, sort of Bolt Thrower was just like, for us, was almost like the perfect crusty, grindy, metally band, so that was something that we were really into from the word go. I actually put Bolt Thrower on in London, like sort of before they split, and it was like, and I was a total fucking fanboy, like from beginning to end, you know what I mean? Because number one, they're actually all really nice people, like, they're all really down to earth, and because they also all came from that punky background, like, so just just to help everybody understand that, like, when we're talking about Bolt Thrower, this is an aside, so I might not go into the interview, but
4 minutes, guys.
Bolt Thrower.
I think we need to reconnect.
Bolt Thrower actually guitar. Yeah. They were guitar techs and bass techs. And they used to live in Coventry, where Lee Dorian used to live. He grew up in Coventry. And they were all sitting in a pub one night in Coventry. And Lee said, for a joke, he said, "I want you guys to form a band and call it Bolt Thrower as a laugh." And that's how Bolt Thrower was formed. No shit.